Hello, this is Jim McHugh, and this is the Big Comedy Festival podcast, and I could not be more excited that I am talking to Mr. Robert Klein right now. How are
Just,
you?
let me get the makeup person. I'm good. How are you, Jim?
Ah, man, we're all so excited. Everybody's like, this is great. This is going to be great.
Nice. I had a wonderful time there when you honored me a few years ago.
Oh, we gave, for those of you listening and watching, we gave Robert Klein the Lifetime Achievement Award, and we were thrilled to get him then. And you did the funniest thing. I mean, it almost knocked me over. We had a guy, Richard Laham from the city of Boston. They did a proclamation as well as our thing, and you gave him a big, you dipped him over like ballroom dancing and gave him a big kiss on the lips, and he left the building. I don't know if you know that. He stood up, his eyes wide like like saucers, and he
Was
left the
it terrifying?
building.
Oh my God! Am I now a Me Too subject?
No, it's funny. He
Oh,
just I put I put on Twitter. I'm going to get the opportunity to interview Robert Klein, and I said, "Do you have any questions?" And he said, "Tell him I said hi." He's
oh.
retired now in Florida, so.
Well, I was hoping for the key to the city, but I've received very few. I received the key to Orlando. I got the combination to Schenectady, New York. They couldn't afford a key.
What do you actually do with a key to the city? All you're looking for is a decent restroom, right?
I have two, one from Virginia Beach and one from Orlando. They're on a shelf collecting dust. But the Orlando one, I was working at the USO, at great risk to my life. I mean, we were flying into Orlando. We were taking fire from the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. And, uh, no, actually, I did a few shows to the USO, so he gave me a key to the city. But Boston now, I have many memories there. I was talking to a guy from the Globe yesterday, James Sullivan. Uh, I remember Paul's Mall. Do you remember that?
Mm-mm.
So that's before your time. I
Well,
played
I'm
that.
a transplant. I grew up in Connecticut. That's why I
Oh,
got my Oz.
where in Connecticut?
West Hartford.
Oh, I went to graduate school at Yale. I used to hightail it after a Saturday class back to the Bronx. I could make it to my parents' apartment in an hour and 10. Um, no, um, what did I ask you?
You're talking about you had a conversation with the guy from the Globe,
Yeah,
James.
James uh, Sullivan,
Right.
and we talked about Passim's. I remember very well, and it's still there, right?
Yes.
Um, that was a smart place. They didn't have a liquor license. I don't know if they do now.
Yeah.
But Lawrence O'Donnell came up to me a couple of months ago at a screening and said he saw me when he was a student at Harvard. Lawrence O'Donnell from MSNBC, any of you?
Yeah.
I've had that a lot, in my career because I used to do a lot of colleges. But I remember staying up all night, probably sex and smoking pot in the early days, and couldn't wait for breakfast. And I loved baked beans at breakfast. I know it's stereotypic because I haven't seen a bean since in Boston.
Yeah.
And also, I used to love to go to Jacob Worth, but it's not there anymore.
Yeah. It's not there. They actually tried comedy for 5 minutes.
Well, they were comical to begin with, without comedians.
Right.
There
Right.
was sawdust on the floor and these
Right.
geezer waiters with aprons, and they Germanic looking, dark furniture. But yeah, you can't beat a good knock verse now and again.
No.
So how's the festival going?
It's
How
going great.
how long? How many years have you been doing it?
This is our 20-year anniversary.
Wow.
20 years.
How many years ago did you honor me?
I think it was 8 years ago.
Yeah, I can't tell. 5 or 8 or. The only thing I have problem with names and nouns. I know my lines. I did a movie this past spring with Annabella Sciorra, and I had long speeches. I have no problem memorizing my lines. I do Will and Grace. I play a father, no problem with lines, but I can't remember why I went into the kitchen. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I said James Sullivan. 1 minute later, I was asking James Sullivan, yes. but other than that, I'm in great shape. I don't have the schedule I used to, but that's by choice as well.
Right. You can
There's
pick what you
plenty
want to do.
Yeah, I really like taking off. But then when I'm on stage, you can't get me off. I really
Yeah.
love uh, making people laugh. And oddly enough, even after doing it 53 years, I'm better now than I ever was.
Yeah.
Uh, I just am more comfortable. The audience, there's great affection, I feel,
Sure.
after all these years of.
Sure.
I was on the Tonight Show a few months ago, in the end of 1968, and 2018. That was my 50th year on the Tonight Show, and Jimmy Fallon gave me this plaque with all, and there were, I think, a total of 93 appearances on the Tonight
Oh my
Show.
God.
But that includes about 12 or 15 guest hosts for Johnny when they were looking,
That so now I got a couple questions. How has that changed? How's it? I mean, because I used to watch Johnny Carson every night. How is that different than what's going on now? Or is it different? I don't know.
Oh, it's different because, he was the king. That was the
Absolutely.
big, big show when there were fewer choices. But he had absolutely no problem with you doing Cavett, who was opposite him, who actually had been on his staff years before, or Merv Griffin, or Mike Douglas. Johnny was secure in his position, and he was the best at it. I mean, the day he left, he was as good as the day he came. But why pay him 40 million when you could get the same size audience with Leno at 1 million or 1.5 million at that time, whatever it was? He didn't change. The audience began to fade a bit, get older, and the young. Doc Severinsen, I worked with him in Atlantic City quite a while ago. He said Johnny didn't want to try, fusion jazz and all. Big band. He wanted big band. Today, there's just, there's a lot of talk shows. Jimmy Fallon has. By the way, I'm not an expert on these because I haven't watched them in any regular way
Right.
for probably 40 years. Somehow it's a relief from show business not to see everybody plugging something. And
Right.
I hated being a host. I had a talk show myself on USA Network, but it was once a week, and we could have fun, and there was plugging, of course. But
So you'd rather be a guest than a host?
the hosting was to try to guide them into promoting. I mean, some people were great guests; it was a pleasure. But I remember I had a radio show in front of live audience for 2 years in 1978, 79. And I had this Canadian band on. They were very famous. I can't remember the name. And I actually had to do my homework and listen to their stuff. And I'm trying to guide them. And they're giving monosyllabic answers. I said, you used two drummers on that and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yeah. It's like Broderick Crawford answering. And I said, come on. Suddenly I felt like Bilko. Let's go. Look alive. It's your album. Um, they're all good. Jimmy has made it more show business and games.
Yeah.
My friend Richard Zoglin wrote an op-ed to the New York Times. Where is the old interviews? Where is Colbert went after an unnatural dip into having to listen to people's bullshit, plugs. He went back to what made him, and it made him. I mean, the guy is
Right.
doing great, knocking Trump, although the country is so huge and there's so many people and so many diverse opinions. You'd think that kind of thing week after week after week, and Bill Maher and all the rest, that would have some effect. But, people are stuck in their own camps. Then the other kid, I'm really impressed with him. I did his show once, Kimmel.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with his social, conscience, that tremendous appeal he made when his child was sick with respect to the Affordable Care Act. I like him. I have a look, whatever works. Conan O'Brien, he got shuffled off, so he has his own niche. You know what? It's all about choice. When I started in the business, there were three networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC. and you had local channels. That was it. Then I was part of something pretty revolutionary because I did the first HBO special. I
Right.
did the first original programming they ever did. Um, I actually used a couple of curse words to prove that.
That
You know,
you could.
I came from a career where every word was parsed.
Right.
I mean, you do the Tonight Show; they want to know what you're saying. I had many arguments in the halls friendly with Freddie DeCorder, with the producer.
Yes.
He had to call New York legal more than once. People gathered around to see how it worked. He was defending Spiro Agnew. I said, the guy pleaded guilty. He's got, you know, he could sue you. Turns out he was his buddy.
Ah,
Um, I did a pilot. I did a summer show replacing Glenn Campbell on CBS. They used to do that. Remember, they'd have a summer replacement.
right.
I had 8 shows with my best friends in show business who are now gone, Peter Boyle and Madeline Kahn. It was terrific shows, and they warned me, don't be like the Smothers Brothers. Don't even mention Vietnam or you're
Right.
gone. You know, very strict. So we used to sneak in our little subtle
Right.
political stuff. And I once I did a half-hour pilot again with Madeline and Peter as my right and left hands. It was called Klein Time. It was, you know, modestly titled, and it was like a Monty Python, and that broke my heart when they didn't pick it up. But we were told it's prime time. You got to be careful what you say. So we had sex for television, and we borrowed some film from UCLA biology department of paramecia reproducing. As you remember from bio, they have no sex; they split and become. So underneath this beautiful colorized thing of the cells swimming, I sang, and if you're wondering what this all is leading to, what I want, make it with you. Get a letter from what CBS at the time, the censors were called continuity acceptance. The sexual innuendo is unacceptable. It's obvious. Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, this is a new perversion. Someone who gets off on paramecia reproducing. You know? I like them when they're young and wet and wild, when they're 5 seconds old. I hate them when they're old, a minute and a half. This is what I had to contend with. All my, and then some critic in the Times in one of my specials, who was not a critic at all, an excellent writer, but they sent to review my thing. She called me a safe comedian because I wasn't in the aristocrats.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
I was supposed to be
Yeah.
reluctantly. I know both guys. I said, sure, I'll do it. I get the
Right.
joke, but they never got to me. I was in New York and business.
Right.
Tellingly, I was not in the aristocrat. I'm a safe comedian. No, I just don't like profanity as a substitute for wit.
Yeah.
Profanity is an incredibly important part of the language when used aptly as a novelist or any writer would.
I,
They're
I
part, not every other word. That's all. I'm in no way a prude.
I'd be interested to hear what you think about. I mean, you knew about Lenny Bruce, and you probably knew them, Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Richard
Not
Pryor.
known. Well, I knew George very well. I did not know Lenny. Of course, I missed him. Go ahead.
But they fought so hard for the ability for comedians to come after them to be able to use language. And now with this cancel culture and all this other stuff, what's your thoughts on that?
What's cancel culture?
Where you say something and people are, they want your show canceled, they want your
Oh,
not to
oh, oh.
work, or they want or freedom of speech.
I'm
They
not a big fan of the term politically correct.
right,
It To me, the first time I heard it was, guys in college from. I went to a small school in Western New York, Alfred. A lot of my friends went to City College, became kind of communists, at that time. Incorrect thinking. It's so North Korean, that
right,
expression.
right,
To me, what they define as politically correct is caring about other people's feelings. Now, I don't like warnings in college courses that this might be violent and it might upset you.
Right.
I don't like that. That to me is moronic. What isn't moronic is, racial jokes. We're not all that hip yet.
Right.
So that if you're doing one, it better be good.
Right.
If you're gonna talk about a joke about cancer, it better be good. I'm not saying that nothing is off limits, but like for example, Joan Rivers was a documentary about her, and I knew her for 42 years or so, and I admired her as a trooper and everything. But she's doing a show and she's making fun of deaf people. They're talking. And some guy in the audience said, "My child is deaf." She grow up, you know. Or
Uh,
when she did a bit with Dick Clark talking to Kirk Douglas, both of whom was stroke victims. It's Howard Stern kind of shit.
right.
That to me is disgusting. And I don't say it should be illegal or
Right.
censored by anyone official. You could turn it off with your hand. I just,
Just not for you.
well, definitely not for me. And I wouldn't dictate to anyone else, but let's face it, there has been a kind of dumbing down of America.
Right.
There really has. Newspapers are simply going out of business. The whole idea of reading that something isn't electronic and smashed into your face, you know, the whole idea of a well lit place which is quiet, to say read a book and feel it in your hand. All right, even I'll grant you want to read your iPad, okay, but the idea of reading things, of information being transmitted in some more subtle way than in your face, and certain trends that go along with, I used to call it a sort of a Howard Stern world, although his influence seems to be waning. But the idea that this UFC, this fighting without gloves and kicking and bloodying,
Mm.
and this I thought wrestling people would have outgrown it, professional wrestling. I mean, are they skilled? Yeah, I mean they can tumble and it's dangerous, I know, but it's fake violence, but disgusting violence, and I don't know, the whole idea of people not having any idea of our past.
Right.
I was a political science major. My father said to me, "What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do to make a living? Sell history?"
Right. Right.
He had a point, but the idea is it's not. We learn from the ignorance, for example, of the history of World War II into the Cold War. Into No one knows. No one even knows civics. They don't
But
know about.
what about somebody like you
Go
have people that are saying like let's ban Huck Finn because some of the language that was in there.
ahead. I'm completely against banning things like that. If for younger children, I mean, the word must be explained. The word nigger is used constantly in that book,
Right.
and it was a product of its time. And that should be an explanation at the beginning of the book or from a teacher. The idea is that people are products of their time. George Washington was a slave owner. He disliked slavery and actually freed his slaves upon his death. He didn't free him sooner. He needed them to make money for him.
Right. Right.
Jefferson stooped his slaves.
Right.
I've been reading a lot about the founding fathers the last couple of years. Some of the best Jeffersonian scholarship was denying right up until the DNA proved that Sally Hemings, his slave, was his mistress and that he bore children with her.
Right.
They couldn't imagine him doing that. We we don't know anything about our past. We don't know anything about how this country was formed, how delicate it is, how unique it is in the world, and certainly was. That's why what's happening now politically is dangerous, because of an uninformed citizenry. Um, that keep on changing the goalposts. Black becomes white. It's very Orwellian, and and this shit is being believed by people who never read Orwell.
Right.
It's a tremendous time for political satire on television, sketch wise. I did Will and Grace with Alec Baldwin. I said to him, if you were doing what you're doing on Saturday Night Live in Egypt, in Russia, in China, in Turkey, you'd be in jail.
Right.
You know, I find it's difficult to talk about. It's not even that funny anymore. I mean,
Right. Right.
but it's also a time for great journalism. These people in the Times, the Globe, the Washington Post are at the forefront of finding out all the facts, and it's amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. It leaves Woodward and Bernstein almost in the dust. They did a fantastic thing. This is a group effort, and it's quite amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
What was the question? No,
I don't know, but I was interested in the answer.
no, it's
We're talking
okay.
about
So
political
you
correctness.
must have been vaccinated with a phonograph needle.
No, I want to ask you a couple comedy questions too about Second City, because you've done both a lot of sketch, but also you're one of the top stand-up comedians like ever. So
By the way, I just got a word that Sketchfest would like to honor me in San Francisco. I flew out there a couple of years ago when they honored Fred Willard. Second City was the best thing to ever happen to me. 1965. This March will be 54 years since Fred Willard and I showed up for work in Chicago. It was great in two ways. The improvisation part and the set pieces. In other words, multiple performances where you say the same lines every night. Great training for theater and acting in general. And for me, as a future stand-up, when I introduce Fred Willard or David Steinberg in a sketch, I do a minute. I do some stuff, and just you get polished there. And when I came back from Chicago, I was there 13 months. I got the first Broadway show I ever auditioned for, Mike Nichols directing, Apple Tree. And David Steinberg had told me about the Improv, which was a club at 44th and Ninth.
mhm.
And if you're a pro, you can get up. And so I got up, and Alan Alda and the cast of the play came to see me the second night I came. And a guy came up to me and said, I'll tell you, man, all right? You were you were fucking brilliant, okay? And I'm a tough cocksucker. That's what he said. Uh, Later on, This Is Your Life. They did two specials. David Frost, Charlton Heston was one. This Is Your Life, and Rodney Dangerfield the other. So they flew me in. I was making a film in Florida, and they flew me up secretly to Vegas. And he says, "Rodney, do you remember this voice?" And he said, "You were brilliant, and I'm a tough customer." I said. And he said, "Now you have to come here every night for 3 years to get it right." I wanted it to be um, just I wanted it to be more than a guy with cufflinks telling jokes.
Yeah.
Lenny Bruce really impressed me. My two greatest inspirations in stand were Lenny Bruce and Jonathan Winters.
I love Jonathan too.
And I was privileged to have at least a little relationship with him towards the end of his life. If I lived on the West Coast, he was accessible to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luca Lake, he loved talking, he loved shticking,
Yep.
But I meet him a few times and we corresponded. And I spoke at his memorial, and his daughter gave me one of his airplanes. Can you see my?
Oh, that's great.
You see the blue one?
Yeah.
That was his. He has it all hanging from his bedroom. After the service, we all went to his house. We sat in his smoking room and had his cigars. He was apolitical, but he was a one man show, which is my concept of stand up. Even I don't know if I use music in my shows, But in fact, the only two Emmy I got, I split with Bob Stein, my a longtime colleague, who'll be with me in Boston. We got it for writing two songs. But also, I like prowl the stage. I do accents. I do this. Jonathan was a one man show.
Yeah.
Lenny was similar, but he pushed the envelope, the social envelope,
Right.
um, which was wonderful. I came to California, unfortunately, about 9 months after he died, and that hideous picture in the LA papers of
Mm.
him dead next to a toilet.
Yeah.
Disgusting. He had no champions except Marty Garber, his lawyer, who I see from time to time here in New York. He was a great guy. Couldn't get work or anything. And when you listen to his stuff now, it just, it's so.
Well, everybody ran away from him, right? I mean, they had to.
I had to. The cops would walk up.
they
Fred
destroy
Willard,
anybody that stood next to him, right?
yeah. Well,
Oh, scary.
the cops would walk up on stage,
Oh my God.
take him off. They
Yeah.
did it in New York. They did it in Chicago at the Happy Medium, and the one in Chicago, he was talking about the Pope. He was talking about the Pope. Then in Milwaukee, George got arrested. And the picture they used in George's obituary in the Times, he looked terrified, and I would have been too. So let him go right away because the thing had been made moot after Lenny Bruce.
Right.
So that was fun. And of course, his 7 words made it to the Supreme Court. He was fantastic. For a guy that uh, the day he died, I was doing the Great American Comedy Festival in Johnny Carson's hometown, and they sent us in a stretch limousine through the cornfields from that little town, Norfolk. They call it. They don't have the courage to call it Norfolk. They call it Norfolk,
Right.
Nebraska, where he was a hero. He built the
Yeah.
wing, and to Omaha, and then home. And my phone is ringing off the hook. George had died. He was very frail. He was very dark in his final work. We took a picture. We were all in one of Seinfeld's specials, sitting in a cemetery together. So what is that stuff you're talking about? Crippled children and all that. You believe that? He goes, yeah. He was comically dark,
Yeah.
and I keep in touch with Kelly Carlin once in a while. We had a wonderful day when they named the little corner near Riverside Drive George Carlin Way. They wanted it near his old neighborhood, but the local priest or the local archbishop, whatever, didn't want to because all the jokes he used to do about church. I keep very close contact with Rodney's daughter, Melanie. She's a sweetheart, and
I still do sets at that club in New York. It looks like it came right out of a time machine.
I was I lent him $5,000 as part of the money needed to open it. And I took his wife at the time, Joyce. The poor thing was a mental patient
Huh.
and an alcoholic, and she had been in and out of hospitals. I took her on my arm. She was very steady. He was very heroic then because he came home one day to 86th Street, and his 3 and 5 year olds are unsupervised, and she's passed out. He
Oh.
said, "I can't go on the road." So he said, "I'm going to open a club." And every delicatessen waiter said, "What are you crazy? A club? Television killed nightclubs."
Yeah.
And yet, counterintuitively, thanks to stuff like I did on HBO and A&E at the Improv or whatever, it made a whole new kind of club, comedy clubs. And
Right.
then there were too many of them in a kind of Darwinian, culling.
Yeah.
There are fewer of them. I remember Paula Poundstone bumping into her in San Francisco. She said, "The comedians suck. There's not enough good comedians because they have so many clubs." Anyway,
Yeah.
um, so the where was I?
We're talking about.
I was
Boy,
talking
I
about
got
those
it.
clubs.
We were
Yeah.
talking about
Oh,
Dangerfield, and
Dangerfield.
we talked
Dangerfield.
about Carlin and Lenny
Dangerfield.
Bruce and
It's
Richard
still
Pryor.
there.
We
Yeah. No. I'm on Dangerfield, and
okay, and then yeah.
that's there. It's a little bit of a dump. You're saying, huh?
No, it's just they haven't. It's
The
it
same
looks like
decor.
19. It looks like the 1950s in there.
Well,
They're actually shooting movies
it
in there
opened in
because it's
'68. He opened it for $220,000. He borrowed from a bank which is now defunct. He borrowed from his aunt. He borrowed from me. I had $11,000 in the bank. Gave him five.
Wow.
I got it back 1 year later. I didn't ask for any interest. It was a tremendous success. He always had kind of street smarts. He kept the wise guys at arm's length. They loved him and they wanted, Rodney, anything you need, and he kept them at arm's length. I'm sorry to. I was on a jag. They're talking, and I forgot where I was. But
No, when I go in there, it's like a museum. They have all the black and white pictures. They're still up there.
is there
Uh,
one of me?
I think there is, yeah, and John Belushi and all
Yeah,
the old,
Babe still owns it. And Tony Bavacqua.
yeah, Tony's in there all the time. Yeah,
I know it sounds.
Cario,
It's a stereotype. It sounds like he's a guy that'll break your nose. He's a bass player.
right?
He worked in a club called the Living Room, and Rodney befriended him. He was a sweet guy,
Yeah,
and he gave him 1/4 of the place to run it. Gave him equity interest like that, and he still has it, which is unbelievable.
yeah.
I saw him at Rodney's funeral, which was weird too, under a tent in this little private movie star cemetery. And the old guard was Jerry Stiller, Ann Mira, me, and Rodney's two children. And on the other side of the aisle was all the big comedians, all the big names, and his widow, a hot blonde with sunglasses, who kept me from him, kept old friends from him. I won't go into it, but
Yeah.
eesh, a very unhappy ending I didn't like.
I'm sorry to hear that. I wanted to touch a little bit. They did a great documentary on you, and all these. You talk about the big stars. They all turned out to talk about what an influence you had on them. Jerry Seinfeld, and the list goes on and on and on.
Love that. In fact, um, text me on your email, and I want to send you the movie.
Oh, that'd be great.
And I'd love you to send it to other people. It's called Robert Klein Still Can't Stop His Leg, and it was directed by Marshall Fine, who was a critic for 30 years and still, I believe, is the treasurer of the New York Film Critics Association. And I'm very proud of that. It's a sweet film that he did over 3 years, and uh, I was so flattered to see this group of people, Jon Stewart and Leno and Seinfeld and Billy Crystal, and I'm leaving some people out, and Bill Maher, that all say how because most of them are about 10 years younger,
Right.
6 to 10 years younger. Leno had a beautiful comment. He said, "You live in rural Massachusetts, you want to go into comedy. Your mother gets these things like, is he still into that comedy thing?" And he said, you could point to Robert Klein and say, look, like, I guess the implication is that I went to college, I'm normal. When I started, being a comedian was not really a profession. No one said I want to be a comedian when I grow up. And so, anyway, I think it's a wonderful film. Unfortunately, it was bankrolled by Harvey Weinstein,
Ah.
and it's a Weinstein production, and it had a year and a half or year window on Stars, and now I guess it's all part of the library and a big litigation
Oh.
because I wanted to see the light of day again.
Uh.
I mean, it was at several festivals, well received at South by Southwest, Tribeca. It's funny, it's warm. I really like it. And by the way, I'm in a new one that just premiered on HBO last week. It's called Bronx, USA. The Bronx, USA. George Shapiro is a very sweet guy. He's 85. Believe it or not, he's the nephew of Carl Reiner, who's 98.
Wow.
And he has a nostalgic thing about the Bronx. About 10 years ago, he and some guys did a documentary called Bronx Boys with Lenny Ralph Lauren's brother. Lipschitz was their real name. You know that? Did you know
No.
that? Yeah. Would you buy a Lipschitz and wear it? Well, there's this great sculptor, the late Jacques Lipschitz, who didn't change his name. But anyway, they play stickball in California. They try to remember the Bronx days. So he produced this new one, which is really lovely. And I sing with a film crew in my old neighborhood. I'm doing a musical number which opens and closes the picture, and Alan Alda's in it, and Colin Powell, and Chaz Palminteri, and a lot of people. But he follows also these young people of color. What used to be a Jewish and maybe Irish neighborhood is now mostly Latino and Jamaican and some, but it's very vibrant, and not high crime at all, but it's changed. And these kids, anyway, it's worth seeing, and it's on HBO. The movie I did with uh, Annabella Sciorra, who, by the way, is testifying against Weinstein as a previous bad act. I
Mm.
texted her how brave she is. She's a terrific actress. You remember her from The Sopranos? She played
Yeah.
the Mercedes dealer.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be out. They said it's going to be at the Palm Springs Film Festival in early January. It's called God is a Worm. A low budget film we did in New York. And that's about all the plugging I have to do.
No, it's awesome. I mean,
Wait a minute. The
there
Boston
isn't enough
Film
time to cover all
Festival.
the stuff you've done. I mean, we could do 3 hours and not touch it, you know?
This is my first. Oh, this is a bad angle for me. That's a better angle, but my
Yeah.
arm. I gotta admit, I have no ego. When you see me on stage, I look great. But women are after me. I have a Porsche, and it has a tiny back seat for when it's a chick magnet, and it's a place they can put their walkers. It's a bad old people joke. It's a bitch. I tell you, I don't like it. I don't like it. But
What's the alternative, right?
yeah, I mean, I'm not remotely suicidal, but there's a whole bullshit about the golden years and all that. And there is a certain kind of thing where little less is required of me. When I look at my life, retrospectively as I'm doing more and more and being forced to by
Right.
people who are doing books and national comedy centers and all that. And I look at my body of work, and it makes me tired to look at it. I mean, I had such energy wanting to do that. One of the secrets is working. I enjoy it. I'm glad I don't do it more, but the schedule I have, roughly, maybe it winds up to working 2 shows a month, plus my television and plus a movie here and there,
Yeah.
and writing some stuff. I love it. But there is a certain, the other thing is, the second thing, one is working, and the other is I have been working for a trainer, it's hard to believe, with a trainer for about 30 years, 3 times a week.
Wow.
We just calculated something like 29 years that this same guy, TJ Sequeria, uh, he comes 3 times a week. Occasionally he has something else he can't come, but I know what to do. I have a little gym in my basement, and I know to keep moving. I know
Yeah.
uh, I live mostly up here, which is about an hour from Times Square. But I have a little place in the city. When I'm in the city, I walk, and I'm realizing already, I can't walk as fast, and but I try to walk a lot,
Yeah.
and I lift weights, and I read a lot, watch television. I love my television set. Oh, I love watching things like Dr. Pol put his arm up a cow's ass and tell if it's pregnant. I love seeing Hitler get it 24/7 on the
I love
TV.
history. I love history.
Yeah. Of course, the History Channel is guys buying antiques from
Right.
mentally deficient hoarders.
Right.
But there's so much interesting diversity. My DVR is a treasure. I don't have to wait for pitching changes and commercials watching the Yanks and the Mets. I don't have to, I love zipping through boring basketball parts, and it's fantastic with the flick of my finger. But that's the thing. I got to be careful. This chair is incredibly comfortable.
Yeah.
I got to get up often, and I got to
That's
do.
that's the trick for comedy clubs now is in comedy shows we have to compete with that comfortable chair and a million channels of anything you want to see, you know?
Live will never be replaced, but like for example. the thrill of going to Yankee Stadium.
Right.
Pardon me for your New England audience. By the way, I rooted wholeheartedly for the Sox after they beat the Yanks 4 straight a few years ago.
Yeah.
Went on. I said they deserve it. Give it to them. I don't hate them. I'm just, but the thrill. My father first took me to the stadium when I was in 1947. I was 5 years old. I'll be 78 next February 8th. The thrill of that, the thrill of Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
I can go pretty much any time I want and sit ringside at the Knicks.
Wow.
They'll sell out every seat. They can't win a game. The thrill is off. I went with my nephew to the opening of the Giants last season in rain and everything.
Yeah.
Forget it. I want to watch it home. I really, I, there is an excitement about live. Of course, I've been to some World Series. I've been to important games. The hassle of it, man, the screaming, the beer gets spilled on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guess that's the convenience of old age. But to go and to be in the same room with someone who's making you laugh or thrilling you with playing an instrument or singing or whatever can never be replaced.
Yeah.
It has its own excitement.
I find I like comedy and audio more than like I don't on TV. I don't want to see. I like to hear it in my car almost as a companion more than. But then live is the real thing that you see the guy interacting in real time to real people, and it's tactile. It's you're part of it.
You listen to comedy in your car, you say?
Yeah. Sometimes I think
On,
I like. What's that?
on Sirius?
Yeah. Sometimes serious or whatever recorded
CD.
or.
Yeah. Well, I used to long ago with my first album, Child of the 50s in 1973. By the way, I just found in storage a number of them in the wrinkle wrap and everything. Like it counts. I don't know. But anyway, the thing used to be, well, why should anyone buy a comedy album? Because once you heard the stuff,
Right.
but good comedy you could hear again and again. I mean, it's true of movies too. I've seen every W.C. Fields and Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy movie,
Right.
so many times. I go back to see my Monty Python. I go back to see Bilko and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah.
The stuff that still lingers with me. But I have very peculiar viewing habits. And I was late to Seinfeld, and I really enjoy watching them. But I'm not an expert on them. But I never saw Friends. I never saw
Yeah. I never
Mary
did
Tyler Moore. I even stopped Mary Tyler Moore in a movie. I was in a movie with, but I never used to watch the show. That's kind of, to me, sitcoms ended. This is terrible to say. I loved Bilko and I loved Jackie Gleason. Of course, All in the Family was hysterically funny, and there have been some funny ones. Modern Family, it's
Yep.
losing steam though. That guy paid such tribute, the husband, to Fred Willard, the one that plays the blonde's husband. He is so Fred Willardy, and he said he sent a video to the Sketch Fest about how Fred influenced him. Fred is amazing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He could crack us up on stage, and then when we start to laugh, he would say, "You people are easily amused." He had this. He has this Midwestern thing. He's a little bit shaky in his health right now. I'm
Uh,
concerned, but we had lunch in California a couple of months ago, and it's hard to believe how fast the time. Well, I won't say it was fast, but it's just amazing how many years. And we take better care of ourselves today. We
yeah.
live longer for the most part. I don't know. It's mysterious to me. And I see some of these geezers I went to college with, judges that never smoked a joint in their life or whatever. They look terrible.
Right.
Some of these guys, some of them were old when they were in college. They were
Yeah.
already
I think
so.
stress has got a lot to do with it too. People that are stressed all the time. That's.
Could be, ambition is energy consuming. When I knew that things might click with me and being a comedian, because when I started in this business, I had absolutely no connections. I don't know how the hell to start after I left the Yale graduate school there. Um, and any kind of ambition. If you want to get somewhere, the kind of work you have to put in, and of course there's some good fortune too. But I think people are stressed. You're absolutely right. They're stressed in many ways financially. Even if they sometimes they make a good living, there's too much spending. There's too much tempting
Right.
to spend. Um, it's not easy. Life isn't easy. It's not easy. But money was always argued about in my house. And one of the luckiest things in my whole life is I knew nothing about money. My
Yeah.
father was a textile salesman. He made a good enough living working hard to send us to college. But I just he hated what he did. I think when you
Right.
like what you do, that helps.
Right.
But the lucky thing for me is people didn't steal my money. Um Al Pacino, I went to see him in Merchant of Venice, and I did a movie with him. We're not intimates, but he's a wonderful guy. I've
Sure.
known him off and on, for a lot of years. He said, "How do you like that?" He stole millions from him, an accountant. Jane Alexander, who I used to kiss 8 performances a week on Broadway in Sisters Rosensweig, wiped out. The
Oh my
stories of Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick. I did a movie with her. She played Mary Tyler Moore's daughter
God.
in that awful movie we did called Labor Pains. They were ripped off by Madoff.
Wow.
Great name for him, isn't it? He made off with plenty.
Yeah.
Um, so it's typical. It was typical in the music business. A lot of these people who had tremendous success, who came from total poverty, ripped off by these music executives and all that. And I have a wonderful pension, several pensions from the unions, and money in the bank because of it was properly handled for me. And I was doing a play in Chicago. We were pre-Broadway, but we closed out of town at the Goodman Theater, and I come back from getting $600 a week. It was that kind of nonprofit theater, to find that I had no cash. I mean, I owned the house, I had this and that, and I had to get to work. And from then on, I took a little more control of what I'm doing. It wasn't that anyone took it; it was that I went and I didn't have such a cushion as I thought.
It was going out as fast as it was coming in.
Yeah, at that time it was,
Yeah.
and I easily could get work and do it. But from then on, I always have a little more of an interest. I guess the I don't know. My father was there was stress in my house. My father was incredibly funny, probably bipolar, although he was not clinically depressed or violent, but he was incredibly funny. He was a
Right.
terrific improviser, and I think I owe much of my
Yeah. My
comedy
dad.
life to him.
Yeah.
What did your father do, Jim?
He did a lot of jobs. He's an ex-marine, and then he was a cop, and then he was in construction.
But was he in Korea?
His joke is he was on the he was on the boat going to Korea, and they had the armistice, or
Fantastic.
and my dad told us when we were kids that the North Koreans found out he was coming and surrendered.
It's a good.
And and I got to meet Jonathan Winters one time, and he found out my dad was a Marine, and he
Mhm.
called and left this great message.
Yeah,
It's Corporal Winters calling Sergeant. I got a young private out here. He's doing a splendid job, and he did sound effects and battle, and it was brilliant.
fantastic.
And then
Oh,
and we laughed because I called my dad on the way home. My dad doesn't talk on the phone. It's not in him. He says, I said, "Did you get a message today, Dad?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, I got a call. You want to talk to your mother?" And my mother goes, "He's had everyone in the neighborhood in here listening to that thing all day."
uh, oh my God. Jonathan has a fantastic story about going the way of the Marines. He was an only child, very unhappy. His parents were not terribly sensitive, and he goes off, 17 years old. He doesn't talk about too many details, but he was in the South Pacific, and he comes home, and his toys are gone. He says, "Where's my airplanes? Where's my?" His mother said, "Well, we gave them away." "Why did you give them away?" He said, "Well, we weren't sure you were coming back."
Oh man,
He's,
that's
he's,
rough.
he told me that story twice, and other people too. I mean, it's a true story. We didn't know if you were coming back. And
That's
he
rough.
said when he went away, all the parents at the train station are crying, and he goes, and my mother said, "You'll be late for the plane." That's fantastic. You have him on tape doing that. He was a wonderful, wonderful, sharp till the end. By the way, it's still on demand on Showtime. The Green Room, Paul Provenza. We were on together. He and I, Johnathon, Paul, myself. His body was a wreck. He could barely walk with a cane, and they sat down in the chair. And I said to him, "Well, that's over." It took him about 5 hours to walk, and he laughed. He was brilliant. His mind was just as sharp as ever. And also in the documentary about me, there's a segment where I'm doing this infomercial with Rickles, and he was a wreck. He asked him, "Please do not film him walking to the chair and all that." He had one of those viruses that was eating his body away or something terrible. But yet his head was unbelievable. Marshall Fine, who's a mild mannered Minnesotan, the director, he goes up and says, "Mr. Rickles, my name is Marshall Fine. I'm doing a documentary on Robert Klein." He said, "Are you that much in need of money, Marshall?" Just like that,
You
you
can't get
know.
a better compliment than that.
I mean, but you didn't even think twice. We
Right.
laughed about that line so many times, and every time I see it, it's in the addendum while the credits are running. So that the mind, I'm hoping that I'm like that too. I'd rather the body go than the mind. I could already feel the body, uh, but the fact that they show my brother-in-law died at 95 a couple of years ago, and he was till the end. He had all his memory was no worse than mine.
Yeah.
So that's possible too. In the middle of all these stories
Right.
about
Right.
dementia, um, I guess it's a crapshoot because we didn't used to live this long. So I think everybody gets something, but you can actually live quite long and still be sharp as a tack.
That's awesome.
I'm hoping for it.
Well, I'm
You're
so
pretty
looking
old, and
forward
you're
to
sharp.
see. I'm really really looking forward to seeing you in Boston, and um, I mean I'm thrilled. What can I say?
Jim, I'm happy to come. And is this the guy at the Globe said that this is a jazz club usually, right?
Yeah, they're known for that. It's the Scullers, I think the oldest jazz or one of the top jazz clubs in Boston, and they have a room kind of next to it. It's all part of the same hotel,
Yeah.
and so you're not actually in the jazz club. They might have needed a few more seats for your audience. So
Oh, I
we'll
hope so. Um, I'm coming. My son is coming. He's going to come with me, and we'll. I'm going to stay the night, so probably I need two beds. That's all in one room.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Bob is
I'm
coming
also,
up.
we got some acts. I don't know if I should do this on the podcast, but I'll just
Yeah.
say it. We have Carolyn Ray and Emo Phillips and Dana Gould, and I was going to see if we could all have dinner maybe before the show. I was going to have it right there at the hotel, um, without everybody else. You have a separate
I don't
room.
like that usually because I don't like before the show I don't like stuff
Okay.
after the show, but I'll be happy to see Mo Phillips again and Dana Gould.
Yeah, he was a head writer, one of the writers for The Simpsons, and he's done I
Uh,
think he's done
uh,
a couple HBO things.
and
And
who's the first one you said?
Caroline Ray.
Oh, I
Yeah,
like her.
yeah.
She's
Eddie
nice.
Brill's up too, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Eddie ran the Great American Festival, the one I was doing. Well, actually, I've been there twice, but that one a few years ago when George died. Um, Caroline Ray, she used to have a talk show, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I like her. She was at the Johnathon thing, I think.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I like her a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's still single, right? No, I'm just kidding. I can never. I've been divorced for 30 years.
So it
I have.
took the divorce took.
I had a divorce took. I had a few, uh, you know, serious relationships. I love my solitude. I mean, I love people too. I have
Yeah.
lunches, and I go into town too. But I love not having to do anything at any time, and I think I've earned it.
Yeah. I think
And
it's something about comedians that we're kind of okay being in our own skin. Like we all travel alone mostly for a lot of years, and that's why small talk with people that aren't comedians can be a little slower. You're like, okay.
you know what? I love people, but I could be. I hate the word loner because that
Right.
implies you're going to blow up a
Yeah, it's
postal.
very close to lone gunman.
Yeah, but I am a bit of a hermit. I do, you know. I didn't hang out that much. The time I hung out most of my life was at the Improv. I never had a bar like Cheers.
Yeah.
I never was interested in drinking. I drank a little because I wanted to be a little buzzed before I went on.
Yeah.
So I couldn't smoke a little pot before I went on. So Bud would give me a Cavassier or something, and I felt, yeah, I can do without it too. But
Yeah.
at the moment, I'm not drinking anything. But um, there was the Improv was like my place. I went there every night, and I remember I got a Mercedes in 1970. I parked it right in front of the place, and I'd go in and do my turn, and Bud would never take a check from me, Rodney Dangerfield, or Bette Midler. She came about 6 months after me, and Bette and Bud Friedman and his wife, um, Silver, became her managers. By the way, Bud was in Korea. You ever meet Bud Friedman?
Yeah, I did. He came to the festival one year.
Oh, he has a big wound on his leg. He was in combat in Korea.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He had a stroke about a year and a half, 2 years ago. He's doing better, but it's a shame. Spunky little dude, man.
Yeah.
Uh, and anyway, I used to go every night. I knew the people. There was, some millionaire who would be slumped over the bar by 9:30. There was, Nick Arnold, who had cerebral palsy but was brilliant and became a writer. But he used to get him to do stand up. People thought he was drunk, and then they realized, he has cerebral palsy.
Wow.
All kinds of interesting characters. David Fry, the impressionist, and what's his name? Jackie Vernon used to come in and do his jokes that he was going to do on the Sullivan Show. And
Was Sullivan Show before your time?
no, sir, I did 6 of them.
You did 6 of them. No, in
Last year's, of course.
but like was that? I've heard it's said that that was bigger than Carson at the time. Is that possible, or is that
Yes, the viewership was bigger because it was prime time.
okay?
And Sullivan and Steve Allen had a feud because Steve Allen could get the guest for $225. Sullivan was paying 10,000 for the same guest.
Wow.
Um, yes, any prime time show in those days was bigger, but it was the most difficult. As a child, I got tired of it. As a performer, I respected it because there was no laugh track.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was true vaudeville. It was the
Right.
only show. There'd be a dog act. I remember these nipping little bastards backstage. They could do the calculus and jump through hoops, but they, were pissed in the corner and shit like uh, a European
I'm sure a few
ballerina.
comedians did too.
So Rodney used to say they used to have more than one comedian very often. And Rodney used to say, "I'll tell you, on the Sullivan Show, when you're a comedian, you hope the other comedian does fair." But it was very tough because, first of all, the balcony in that theater, which is now where Colbert is,
Yeah.
which was redesigned for Letterman, it was a legit house. The balcony, the people in the balcony could not even see the stage, only monitors.
Oh.
The bottom orchestra part, about 1/6 of it was a glassed-in area for Ray Bloch and his orchestra.
Wow.
So there were people on the bottom, and of course, people on top could see you on TV. But while you're doing your bit, Sullivan is not off stage. He's on downstage right with his son-in-law, Bob Precht, talking about who's coming next,
Wow.
so that they've seen him all their lives. Their attention is divided. It was very hard to really kill him
Distract.
on the show.
Wow.
When I have seen all 6 of my shows, they've been broadcast. Um, People have sent me a couple of tapes. I mean, what went for really doing well was not as good as I would do on the Tonight Show. I mean, there were a couple of killers, but that was a tough show. And the thing is, the first time I ever did it, and it's live, completely live, the Precht pulls me aside and said, "Listen, um, Ed may call you over after your set. He may call you over. If he does, don't let him push you to the wrong camera. He'll have a tendency to turn you towards the wrong camera." I'm thinking to myself, I'm pissing in my pants here. The
Yeah.
first time doing a show. He's been doing it for 15, 20 years, and he doesn't know which camera to go. I have to fight him. And sure enough, he pushed me towards this camera. It was like the hockey game, thing back and forth. Uh, like the goalie in one of those mechanical hockey. He pushed me this way, I push him this way. He did call me over, and I didn't realize about him that because his grandchild was doing a documentary about him, that he was in the forefront of racial tolerance, that he was a pretty good dude about that. I never
Good.
really had no idea. I had no idea what his talent was, why
Did
he had that.
did that change for you? The fear, like going on Sullivan and then later Carson. Did that get better? The more you do it, less panic. I mean,
Rodney, who was my Yale Drama School for stand up, told me no matter what, you prepare for that Tonight Show. You got to kill him every single time. That's the most important thing. And as bad as he was personally, smoking and drinking, etc., he finally got too afraid of coke later in his life. But
yeah,
he prepared studiously for his appearance on the Tonight Show. He'd start a couple months or more before,
yeah,
start working on the new jokes, and every time you're with him, he'd say, "I'll tell him, is this funny? Is this funny?"
yeah.
And he'd write them on a shirt cardboard, the kind you get from when you get your shirts back from. And he'd have his list. He called it a necklace. It was usually about 18 or 19 jokes.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is, Johnny knew it. And so after the jokes were over, Johnny would throw a question at him, and he'd go, "Nah, nah." And that's crazy because he was such a good improviser. Bud Friedman would give him a bottle of wine, and half the time when he was up at the Improv was like David Fry. Do you remember the Impressionist? You
No.
don't. He became LBJ, and when he did it, he became Rockefeller. He was a little guy with a bad drunk, and he was on all the. He was virtuoso. He was the most unusual impressionist. I've known many of them. He had no identity himself. There
Ah,
was no David Fry. It was, a
right.
phone. He had a beautiful Buick convertible. He had a block on the pedal, which was embarrassing. Anyway, he's hassling Rodney from the audience who's drunk, and they get into a yelling match, and he says something, and Rodney says, "Don't you raise your voices to me." I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing. He was such a good improviser. But when he did the Tonight Show, when you're a comedian on those talk shows, you're not like any other guest. If you're Johnny Mathis, you go on, you tell a funny story about your dog. If you're Rock Hudson, you're a comedian. You better be funny. So there's stuff planted and planned for the most part, and that's the way he did it. And if you veered from that, he wasn't ready.
yeah,
Uh, but that was important, and it was nerve wracking doing that show. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. Um, you know, Wanting to succeed, and let's face it, it wasn't like the audience at the Improv, kind of show business types
yeah,
and their followers. This
yeah.
is America.
Right.
They've been out there baking in the Burbank sun
Right.
and get led into this 60-degree studio. They're all excited. They're not hipsters, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So I wasn't going to go on there, and because Rodney used to say, be careful, that intellectual stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
I wrote bits that I was proud of anyway. I mean, the supermarket bit, the dentist bit, the things that were, my own touch on them. They were funny, but they were universal. And I pushed the envelope here and there when I could. I'll tell you the truth. There were times on the Tonight Show when only Johnny and the band knew what the fuck I was talking about. And he was so generous. I wouldn't have liked to be married to him. I think in his first three marriages, he was a bad husband. He was very happy in his retirement,
Right.
but he was so generous to a young performer who prepared properly and,
Right.
and he knew had the stuff.
You didn't feel like if you dropped a line, you're gone and to oblivion.
Say that again?
I mean, you didn't feel like when you're on that show, after a while, you had done it enough where you felt like, hey, if I drop a line, I'm not fired
Yeah,
forever.
no, he was very generous in his laughter, and he genuinely found me funny. And
Yeah.
he didn't like when people were smart ass. He'd give
Yeah.
them, let them hang themselves with their own rope.
Yeah.
I did Cavett many, many times. Of course, we had the same managers, Rollins and Jaffe, and it was it was really a wonderful show. A lot of the stuff that he did is now preserved and being shown. Um, and Merv Griffin was nice, but he had no idea when your punchline was coming and he'd ruin it. But he was
He'd step
a
on it.
good guy. Mike Douglas was, Mr. Family Man, was stooping one of the girls in the office, giving her $50 a week. I was on the show. Yoko Ono was doing something I think she called singing, and Mike whispers in my ear, "Got a big pair of tits." That's what Mike Douglas. Um, Della Reese had a talk show that was terrific. David Frost was okay. I did everything in humanity. I mean,
was
there
it
was
was the idea that like I always thought of it like you go in those days, and I don't know, but you go on TV and then you build a following, then you make your money on the road in the theaters, or was it you made enough on those appearances where that was actually
no. The appearances were minimal. Um, the first salary check from the Tonight Show was under $300, or maybe 300. They're now paying, I think, 700.
but if you
Uh,
went from there, you were and you did good, you could clean up on the road.
well, in those days, it was less competition. They would talk about you at the water cooler the next day.
Right.
And before me, it was even easier to do that. Um, uh, but I didn't want to do sitcoms at first. I
Right.
turned down MASH. I was
Wow.
offered uh, the part opposite Alan.
Trapper John.
Yeah, but he only did it 1 year, and he quit. Became a financial advisor. What was his name again? A Southern guy.
I can't remember his name, the actor.
Yeah, yeah. But I didn't. The movie was a masterpiece. I didn't want to do a sitcom called that. I know it was a good show. I didn't watch it really much. Joke laughed. I didn't laugh during the operating room, but it didn't. I didn't interest me. I was offered the part of Robin Hood, and they had a series when days were rotten, um, which lasted a year. I thought it was juvenile. I didn't want to get caught in that. I was doing well as a comedian. I was hot. I did four movies very early in 69 to 70, including with Barbara Streisand and George Segal, Owl and the Pussycat. Um,
I was working a cruise ship last week, and they had the movie Hooper,
oh, yeah,
and you did a great part on that. You were the director of the movie they were shooting.
I was. It was a wonderful movie. Hal Needham, who was finally recognized in Hollywood before he died. It was the premier stuntman. He had most of the bones in his body broken. Bert helped him a lot in directing it, but that was a lot of fun. It was,
Yeah.
and Bert was great to work with. He set a good table. I don't know how he became a clown towards the end with that woman and everything.
Yeah.
To me, he was terrific. Um, all in all, I just probably I would have liked to do a few more good movies. I actually have been in over 40 feature films. Can you believe
Wow.
it? And a few television movies and hundreds of television appearances. I was a regular on a series of an NBC film series called Sisters, which ran about 5 or 6 years with Celia Ward, Swoosie Kurtz. Women loved it, and it was very big in Europe. And I used to come. I never moved to LA. I used to rent houses or stay in hotels, and now I mean, I've traveled enough. Put it this way: I haven't bought a bar of soap in over 35 years,
I can identify with
or
that.
or a shoe shine cloth. I haven't had to buy. I'm tired of it. The
Yeah.
hotels and traveling and everything is no thrill anymore. I did see every state but three. I may have to see them: Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming.
Okay.
I hope there are no people in them because they're Trump. Just I want to visit the states,
Well,
but
they can
without.
have them leave for you. Just say they if they'd be nice enough to leave.
Well, they're not as bad as the Confederacy. I was never. I'm rather tired of Confederate nostalgia, and,
Hmm.
and and it's all becoming clear now. Yesterday there was a movie about with Errol Flynn. He plays Jeb Stuart, and John Brown is the villain, a terrorist, in it. And of course he was a terrorist, but the abolitionist part is played down. And you see blackface, and you see what America was, and all these statues and all these signs of the Confederacy. And mind you, the war was basically about slavery, no matter what they say.
Right.
Um, they were all built in the 20s. They were not
Right.
built right after the war.
That's right.
They were built in the era of Jim Crow. And if you're a black person going to school every day at the University of Alabama and you see all these dudes on horses that try to, I mean, it was, it's called treason. And South Carolina was the first in treason. And they were the last, pretty much. They were a pain in the ass during the founding fathers, too. We
Right.
wouldn't have had a union if slavery had been settled then. So,
Right. Right.
and who was this businessman that said the Civil War could have been avoided? They could have negotiated the end of slavery. I mean, there's all kinds of apology for it, and it's only a little more than a century ago that it was ended, and it has repercussions.
You got to love a guy who can have hindsight that could have avoided the Civil War. If only he was around, he could have straightened it out in a minute.
There was no avoiding it, but
Yeah.
the carnage of it,
Unbelievable.
the weaponry being far more advanced than any kind of medical
Right.
uh, uh, palliatives, made it awful. Same with World War One. World War Two, at least medicine improved.
They knew at
Uh,
least about sterile. Not they used to say it was unmanly to wash your hands after. Like, oh my God.
right.
You
I
know.
was just watching Louis Pasteur story with Paul Muni, which I'd seen as a child. Monsieur Pasteur, your theory of finding for surgery is ridiculous. Put my hand on my ass. You want to go into the movie, Rembrandt, I will not give you a sou for paint. You're a drunken idiot. Not. Give him the money. Give him the money. Well, Jim, I
Thank you
hope
for your time. I this has been an absolute pleasure for me, and I really appreciate it. I can't wait to come to Boston for the Boston Comedy Festival.
I'll be there Saturday.
It's gonna be great.
Now, is this place near Cambridge?
Yeah, it's right on the Charles. You're on the they call it the Boston Cambridge Hilton DoubleTree because it's right across the street, and they have a lot. I think it's owned by Harvard, the property, like everything else in that
Um,
part of town.
don't tell him I went to Yale.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna lose your rate.
I worked at Sanders Theater at Harvard years ago. That's where I saw the thing above the urinal. Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. And I did that joke on the Tonight Show, and I got 3 dozen letters. Mr. Klein, with they all were fans, and we expect more of an intelligent man like you. Schizophrenia is not that. It's schizoid, and I have a child who has schizophrenia.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they still say it. It's a schizophrenic foreign policy. No, schizoid is cut in half. Schizophrenia is a mental illness in which one hears voices and all that. Schizoid. But anyway, I
I
felt
didn't
badly
know
about
that. I thought you were
it.
going to say they called to say I wrote the joke and you owe me $50 or something.
Yeah.
I thought that's where you're going with that.
No, no. Just, I had a. Um, they were right. It was. I should have known better.
Well, see,
First
that
of all,
points back to the thing earlier we were talking about.
yeah.
You do something and also you meet somebody and it changes your outlook on something. It's easy to make fun of something. Like I didn't really understand till you just explained.
Incredibly, informed people make that mistake, but it wouldn't matter if I had, the point is it was making fun of a mental illness. And while I wasn't the worst crime I've ever committed, they had a very good point. That's all. Not
Right.
a big deal. I did a thing where years ago I said toys are getting so complex. You have a doll that goes, Mama, Mama, and I said, it's supposed to be aesthetic realism, and it looks more like a seizure of some sort. I got letters. I have a son that has seizures. They were wrong
Yeah.
because that's a descriptive
Right.
thing of looked like a seizure. It's generic.
Right.
I think they're wrong there.
I
And
also I also find sometimes people are offended for somebody else, and the person you're having fun with in the audience is they're laughing. Could Rickles survive in this comedy world we're in now?
well, Rickles never.
I think
Uh,
his secret was he really kind of loved everybody, and so if he's making
okay.
fun of you, you kind of
No, he was a nice guy. He was social, and because his best friend was what's his name? The
Newhart.
comedian was the dentist Newhart. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were very close. I saw Rickles was being honored at some Friars thing in a hotel ballroom in New York. So I want to go up to the front to say hello to him. And Newhart sees me. Oh, he loves you. He loves you. And I love you. I love your specials. I go and say hello to Don and his wife. This and that. I go back to my seat, and Newhart promptly does one of my jokes that he heard on HBO. And then
Oh no.
Cunnilingus is an Irish airline. I have a whole bit, and they come to Ireland on Cunnilingus. Only $379.50, complete with a tour of Bunratty Castle. Come to Ireland and Cunnilingus. We'll get you there lickety split. See our fabulous labia lounge at JFK, done completely in pink taffeta by Yves Saint Laurent. Anyway, why were you on Rickles? Oh, Rickles. He was a warm person, and he didn't. Uh, he could get away with certain stuff, I suppose. I don't. I think he'd be just as funny. I don't
Okay.
think. I don't think there's a problem there. I think. Uh, you know what? I just. If something is well done and sophisticated. There's a new deadpan comic that my son likes, and he has an Italian name, I think, and he does things like bizarre jokes about killing his children or his mother or something. I don't know. That's a question of taste, but again, politically correct. Um, I think taking into consideration other people's feelings, because look what's happening. We're backsliding. When I was a kid in post-war New York, we had things like you can get good milk from a brown-skinned cow. The color of the skin doesn't matter anyhow. Anti-prejudice campaigns on television with Benny Goodman and his quartet. which included Lionel Hampton, who was black, and they make beautiful music together, the black and white and all that. And that may seem corny, but we're kind of backsliding when, this go back where you came from, the rise in hate crime. I read something depressing this morning about the rise in anti-Semitism in Italy. There are 4 fucking Jews there. What are you in Poland? There are no Jews left, but there's anti-Semitism. I mean, how many Holocausts do there have to be? And you have people, again, that's part of historical memory. Do they know what it is? They've heard the word. There are people who deny it, like these guys in prison with swastikas.
Well, they also throw the name around. They throw everybody's a Nazi.
Yeah, Holocaust, right.
If the guy gives you a small ice cream cone, what are you, a Nazi? Nazis are pretty.
Right. There is, I think in the kind of organized murder of 6 million plus an additional 3 or 4 million killed in the camps, gypsies, homosexuals, enemies of the state, but 6 million Jews. Germans kept impeccable records. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Impeccable records. So there's no doubt of it. You're right. Trivializing words and all that. See, for example, years ago, when I hosted Saturday Night Live, first year, third year, can you believe it? 40 years ago. There was a bit that Chevy used to do that was hilarious. As a newscaster, the other newscaster would be talking, and he's making funny faces behind her.
Right.
It's a juvenile thing, but it was hilarious. So whatever the other newscaster is saying is unimportant. It's fodder for the bit, right?
Right.
So there had been an earthquake in Sicily that week in which over 10,000 people had been killed so far. And they used that as the fodder. See, that was thoughtless to me.
Yeah.
It was thoughtless. Don't trivialize something like that.
And the bit would have worked with any other story. They didn't have to use that
stuff. I like Gilbert Gottfried. He's an old friend. He's sweet, very peculiar guy, very, very odd guy. I just saw him the other day at the premiere at Warner Brothers, at Time Warner, of the that new documentary about the Bronx. But when there was a tsunami that killed, thousands and disrupted stuff in Japan, and he made the beach joke there, that was wrong.
Right.
And his wife said, "My God, we needed that money." That's wrong. He should have been fired.
Right.
That's a terrible thing to say.
Right.
And to make for what's his name, the one who took his penis out, who's working again, Louis C.K.
Louis C.K., yeah.
Making fun of the kids in Parkland? Man, that's like Joan Rivers doing the stroke thing. And he has talent. I think he's really, to me, an excellent filmmaker. I saw a couple of his shows, and they're imaginative and well-directed and all that. But, that's a whole other thing to me, too. How can anyone, I was in a position of power, of casting and everything. How can anyone brought up in a civilized place think he's so important that he can take his penis out in front of these women and just, I can do this. This is my fantasy. Keep it in your head.
Yeah.
I worked with gorgeous women. I worked with women, all, executive women and dancers and everything. We used to flirt years ago, which you don't do anymore, but would I take advantage like that, do that? Forget it. I never did.
Yeah.
And Harvey Weinstein, forget it. Hello, Robert. That's how he talks. He's beyond words, so, I think I'm talked out, man.
Okay. Robert Klein, thank you so much. Thank you.
I'll look forward to seeing you.
I look forward to seeing you
in a few days, and make sure you publish this before the thing, so we.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get it.
Who's ever watching you?
Yeah.
You look good, McHugh. The years have been kind to you.
Thanks. You too.
All right. See
Bye.
you soon. Bye-bye.